Welcome to Ouch. Was that a ghost? This podcast may contain graphic material, which some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised.
Help me.
Now that we covered that, here's your host, Liz.
Welcome back to Ouch, Was That a Ghost? This week I am covering the Myrtle Plantation. It's often described as the most haunted house in the United States, as many are, apparently. Reportedly having at least 10 murders in the house, although that may just be lore. There is one documented murder that did occur in the home. The plantation saw plenty of death from disease, and with enslaved people working on the property, there was plenty of suffering and mistreatment. On top of the fact that the plantation is said to have been built on an Indian burial ground, which is a recipe for haunting on its own. So this was Revolutionary War time, and General David Bradford, who was a lawyer, and he was a deputy attorney general in Washington County in Pennsylvania. He built a house there on South Main Street. It was completed in 1788, this showcasing his wealth, with a stone exterior instead of the log houses they had at the time. I did see in one article that he also had an escape tunnel built into the house in case somebody decided to rob him. Well, General Bradford, or as they called him, Whiskey Dave, along with his wife Elizabeth and children, only stayed in this house in Pennsylvania for about 6 years, as Bradford was said to be one of the leaders of the Whiskey Rebellion, which was a group of people that band together to push back against the federal government that was imposing high taxes on whiskey. And of course, back then, there wasn't online bill pay or auto pay. A tax collector would physically go out and collect the taxes. But the people opposed, or the rebels that didn't want to pay, would form a mob and force the collector out of there. It's said that one of the collectors was even tarred and feathered. Word of this uprising got to President George Washington, and he was like, no, this ain't happening. So he sent 13,000 troops to handle this pushback, and warrants were issued for suspected rebels, including one for General Bradford. So General Bradford fled to Spanish West Florida, which is current-day St. Francisville, Louisiana. There he obtained a 600-acre plot where he built a house and a plantation in 1796, naming it Laurel Grove. The site of the plantation was said to be a Tunica, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, I apologize, Indian burial ground. Bradford lived there alone until he was pardoned for his leadership role in the Whiskey Rebellion in 1799 by then President John Adams. After he was no longer a wanted man, he sent for his wife and 5 children that were in Pennsylvania to come to Louisiana with him. General David Bradford died in 1808, leaving the property to Elizabeth, his widow. In 1817, the property was passed to Judge Clark Woodruff, Elizabeth's son-in-law, who lived on the property with his wife, Sarah Bradford. They went on to have 3 children, Cornelia, James, and Mary. So this is probably the most popular legend of the Myrtle's Plantation. It's the story of Chloe. And there are variations, and some people say that this is just pure lore. Chloe was said to be a beautiful young slave working on the property, and Judge Woodruff took a liking to her. And in many articles it says she was taken as a mistress. She was not taken as a mistress. You know that means she was just forced by him. But Chloe had a penchant to eavesdrop, whether to find out something to maybe use against the family, or for power, or out of fear, not knowing whether Mrs. Woodruff knows about her, or maybe fearing that Judge Woodruff, who knows. But either way, it's said that she was caught by the family with her ear pressed against the door. So Judge Woodruff is said to have ordered her left ear cut off as punishment. After this, Chloe was said to always wear a green headscarf to cover her missing ear. Either way, she took her punishment and began planning her revenge. On Cornelia's birthday, the oldest daughter, Chloe was said to have been making a cake to celebrate. And she added oleander leaves, which is a highly toxic plant, which can cause diarrhea, dizziness, irregular heartbeat, nausea, stomach pain, vomiting, or death. And some say that she was just trying to make the family sick so she could nurse them back to health, save them all, and get back into Judge Woodruff's good graces again. Others think maybe she just wanted pure revenge, and her intention was to murder the wife and all the children. Either way, Sarah and 2 of the 3 children died after consuming the cake. The story goes that other slaves on the property learned of what she had done, and to avoid being punished for what Chloe did, they dragged her from the house, hung her from a tree, and dumped her corpse in the river. While some say it was yellow fever that caused the children and Mrs. Woodruff's death. Because, yellow fever was running rampant at the time. The heartbroken judge took his only surviving child and moved away, selling the property in the 1830s to Ruffin Gray Sterling and his wife Mary Catherine Cobb. While Sterling and his family lived there, they extensively remodeled and restored the 1.5-story rambling frame mansion, extending the house to the south, practically doubling its size, adding all sorts of details to the interior, different trim, framework, and then filling the now 22 rooms with imported furniture from Europe, adding one-of-a-kind Celian medallions in rooms in a 300-pound chandelier, and the house was rebranded or renamed the Myrtles, after crepe myrtles that grew around the property. The family seems to have known that the property was haunted, as Mary had stained glass windows made with French crosses trying to ward off any evil spirits that wanted to enter the house, as well as having locks on the doors put in upside down to confuse any spirits that wanted to get in. In 1854, Ruffin's Gray Sterling died of consumption, and his widow Mary started running the plantation. The property later passed to William Winter, who was Mary's son-in-law. He had married her daughter Sarah. Sarah and William went on to have a daughter, Kate, who contracted yellow fever, and out of desperation, they sent for a voodoo priestess named Cleo, who tried to save young Kate, performing all sorts of rituals. Unfortunately, Kate Winters ended up passing away at only 3 years old. William Winters, instead of blaming the disease, is said to have blamed Cleo and had her hung for not saving his daughter. Again, this may just be lore, but some people think that the apparition that's seen around the property may be Cleo and not Chloe. Kate, the little girl who passed away, is said to still be on the property, seen and captured on camera by visitors. People reportedly seen her apparition around the bedroom where she was quarantined until she died. The same bed that she died in is said to still be there and randomly just start shaking so much that the floor underneath the bed has all kinds of indents. And there's a painting of Kate at the property. It was painted halfway while she was still alive, and it was finished after she passed away, but people report that the eyes on the painting will follow you around. During Civil War time, the house was robbed of a lot of its valuables, including imported furniture, and one story goes that during some of the ransacking, again, maybe lore, that 3 Union soldiers were killed trying to rob the house, and that the ghosts of these 3 men are seen throughout the property. The house did manage to survive the war. In 1871, William Winter heard yelling outside, and he went outside to check it out, and an unknown man shot Winters outside of his home. He did manage to get back inside and was climbing up the stairs to his wife Sarah, and only made it to the 17th step, where Sarah came down to meet him, cradling him as he took his last breath, this being the only confirmed murder in the house. William Winter was buried in a nearby cemetery next to his daughter Kate. Ownership of the property went through several more hands. In 1891, Harrison Milton Williams purchased it. In the early 1900s, the property was divided up amongst Williams' heirs. The interior of the property has incredible detail, with marble floors, hand-painted stained glass, arched mantels, one-of-a-kind ceiling medallions that I mentioned earlier, made from clay, Spanish moss, and cattle hair. And the house still has a lot of its original floors, and most of the windows are original. The house has a 125-foot veranda that wraps around the house. The house has 6 fireplaces, with the 2 floors of the house having a total of 22 rooms. In the 1970s, James and Frances Kierman Myers purchased the plantation, and restoration efforts began on the home. The Myers opened the Myrtles as a bed and breakfast, and guests started reporting all sorts of strange happenings, strange sounds, and seeing a young woman with a headdress, thought to be Cleo or Chloe. And in 1991, the owner had some photos taken of the property for an insurance agent. The agent asked that no people be in the photo, and it was later brought to her attention that there was a figure in the photo of a young girl with a headdress, but the bottom half of her body was transparent. Although Chloe's existence is still debated, it can't be totally discounted either. I highly doubt that they kept meticulous records of slaves, and it seems to be more popular opinion that that is Chloe over Cleo. Then the property changed hands again to the Mosses, who opened the house for house tours and allowed people to spend the night. Mrs. Moss reported hearing her name being called out and the entity using her husband's voice, who was out at the time. The Moss family have reported encountering apparitions of children. Visitors report all sorts of entities, sounds, strange happenings in and around the plantation. Mirrors, which have different legends in different cultures over the years. One being that if a soul finds a mirror before it's buried, it can get stuck in the glass. And the trapped soul is said to be able to leave marks or even show their form in the mirror. Some cultures even bury the mirrors with the deceased to prevent the person's soul from being trapped. In the Myrtles plantation, there is one mirror in particular in the house that's said to be haunted. People report seeing children or the mirror having fingerprints that will reappear, or streaks thought to be that of Sarah Woodruff's tears, looking for her only surviving child. Handprints of possibly the children appearing seemingly from the inside of the mirror. Streaks thought to possibly be Chloe's blood from her murder. No matter how many times the mirror is cleaned, the strange marks reappear. People report seeing a ghost wearing a green headscarf, wearing one large earring and said to be transparent below the chest. The spirit of a caretaker is often seen on the plantation. A young girl is seen looking through the window, but from the outside in on the second floor. Items are said to vanish or be moved, or people will go to sleep and find their clothes folded, which I guess that's not the worst thing in the world that can happen. The staff believes that there's 14 plus spirits on the plantation, with some being children. Then there's the legend of the 17th step, where William Winter is said to be heard making his way up the stairs or gasping for his last breath on the 17th step. And the land where the Myrtles' house was built is said to be on an ancient Tunica Indian burial ground. And some people have reported seeing an apparition of a female Native American who may have had her burial site disturbed. The Myrtles Plantation is a bed and breakfast that people travel from all over the world to go visit and try to have a paranormal experience. There are all sorts of different rooms that guests can rent, including the doll room, where people report the dolls moving or the feeling of being touched, or waking up to find a doll in the bed with you looking at you. Eek. So who knows what causes the activity at the Myrtles? It could be the natural deaths that occurred there, or the horrific treatment of slaves, or maybe the story of Chloe is true, or the Native American burial ground that was disturbed, or a combination of the tragedies on the land. If anyone has had any experiences at the Myrtle Plantation, I would love to hear them. Well, thank you everybody so much for listening. Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you need more content or just want to help support the podcast, head on over to patreon.com and search Ouch, Was That a Ghost? If you need some snazzy merch, you can find it at crowdmade.com by searching Ouch, Was That a Ghost? If you have a story you'd like to share, you can email it to ouchwasthataghost@yahoo.com. You can also find us on Facebook and all the other social media platforms under Ouch, Was That a Ghost?
Help me.
All links can also be found on ouchwasthataghost.com.